The studio lights were bright, but something in the air felt too heavy to ignore. When the name Sandra Bullock was mentioned, Keanu didn't smile. He just took a deep breath, like someone reliving a moment that was never spoken aloud. The host tried to keep the pace, but his silence lingered too long. Then, with glassy eyes and a quiet voice, Keanu said something that made even the cameras pause. What he revealed that night wasn't in the script, and no one in the room was ready for it. Oh, and before we continue, tell us, what's the one thing you love most about Keanu Reeves? Let us know in the comments. The studio lights were warm. On the skin, the audience clapped enthusiastically as the central camera zoomed in on the stage. The talk show's logo glowed on the screen behind the host. Vanessa Torres, perfectly poised as always, smiled with well-trained ease as she welcomed her guest. Ladies and gentlemen, Keanu Reeves! Applause filled the room. Keanu walked in with composed, deliberate steps, dressed in black from head to toe, his trademark. A quiet smile formed on his face as he waved, shy but present, to the audience and then to Vanessa. Keanu! Such a pleasure having you here. Vanessa beamed, striking the perfect tone for primetime television. Thank you. The pleasure is mine, he answered, his voice calm and low. They shook hands and took their seats, close chairs, a polished coffee table, sparkling water on either side. Everything meticulously prepared, but something unprepared was about to happen. Vanessa began with the usual questions, his new film, the action scenes, behind-the-scenes stories. Keanu answered with his signature grace, slightly introspective, but warm. The audience laughed in moments, leaned in at others. It was all going as expected, until it wasn't. Vanessa flipped one of her cue cards and smiled curiously. And speaking of on-screen chemistry, we have to talk about speed. Sandra Bullock. What a duo. A soft laugh rippled through the crowd, but Keanu didn't laugh. He paused. The smile on his face faded just slightly, and his gaze unfocused. For the briefest of moments, it felt like the entire studio held its breath. Vanessa noticed. She was far too seasoned not to pick up on the subtle shift in energy. Keanu? She asked gently. Are you okay? He took a deep breath and adjusted in his chair, his eyes still distant. Yeah, it's just, he hesitated. A faint smile reappeared, but it was different. A smile loaded with memory, with weight, with something that had clearly remained unsaid for a long time. You look like you just remembered something, Vanessa said softly, almost a whisper now. Keanu looked down for a moment, then at her, then out to the audience. I think maybe today's the day I tell a story I've never shared before, never in public. Complete silence. Not even the camera crew moved. Vanessa straightened up, surprised, but didn't interrupt. She let him speak. Everyone always talks about the chemistry Sandra and I had in Speed. And yeah, there was something there, something that went beyond the scenes. But it was never spoken, not even between us. He leaned back slightly in his chair. The camera zoomed in, catching the lines on his face, the softness in his eyes. There was a quiet tension in the air, like something sacred was about to be revealed. Her name, he said, as if tasting the words before releasing them. It changed the tone of my day. Always did. Vanessa watched him closely, still silent. The audience was frozen. A few eyes already glistened. Something deeply human was unfolding. For a long time, I thought it was just in my head, Keanu continued. One of those passing infatuations you keep to yourself. But with time, I realized maybe it was more. He paused again. Vanessa leaned in slightly, encouraging him. More how? Keanu smiled, a small, almost melancholic smile. More real, more lasting, more quiet. The audience didn't move, and then he added, "But the strange thing is, I never said anything, not to her, not to anyone, until now." Vanessa tried to keep her expression neutral, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew this was big, bigger than a segment, bigger than an exclusive. And why now, Keanu? He thought for a long moment. The silence between question and answer felt rehearsed, but it wasn't. Because I think I'm ready, and maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Sometimes, the most important story is the one you've never told. Vanessa glanced briefly at the production team. No one dared interrupt. No cuts, no commercial break. What was happening didn't belong to the script anymore. Keanu folded his hands, looked at the audience and said, "I had feelings for Sandra, real ones. But I never said anything, and that story starts right there." Yet, as Keanu takes his seat, something feels off. Vanessa holds her cue cards with a sharp smile. What was supposed to be a calm conversation could turn into something much bigger. But what Vanessa doesn't know is that in just a few minutes, she would be the one left speechless. What Keanu would say that night would change everything, and no one in the audience would ever forget it. The energy in the room had shifted. It was no longer a talk show. It felt more like a confession booth. Vanessa adjusted her position slightly, her voice softer now. "Keanu, when you say you had feelings for Sandra, what exactly do you mean?" He smiled gently. I had a crush on her, a real one, from the very beginning." There was a quiet gasp from the audience, subtle, almost respectful. It wasn't the kind of crowd that cheered over celebrity gossip. What Keanu had just said didn't feel like gossip. It felt like truth. "It started on the set of Speed," he continued. "We were both so young, both trying to stay professional, focused. But in the in-between moments, during lighting setups, rehearsals, shared rides, I started noticing little things." He looked up, letting his memory fill the silence. She laughed at everything. Not in a forced way. She really found joy in the smallest things. It was magnetic. There was a lightness to her. I remember thinking, how is someone so grounded and still so free? Vanessa smiled warmly. "And she never knew?" He shook his head. "No, I never told her. I thought it would complicate things. We were building something strong professionally. I didn't want to mess that up, and I guess part of me thought it wasn't mutual, so I stayed quiet." A beat. He leaned forward a bit now, more connected. You know those moments when you're around someone, and you start picking up on their rhythms, their silences, their favorite kind of tea, the way they tilt their head when they're thinking. I noticed all of it. And the more I noticed, the deeper it went. Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. "Did you fall in love with her?" He hesitated, his eyes searching the floor for a long second. "I fell for the version of her I knew then, and maybe for the version I imagined too. But love? I don't know if it was love. It was definitely something powerful." The audience was silent. A kind of sacred hush had taken over. Vanessa flipped her card slowly, unsure if she should read the next question, but Keanu continued, unprompted. "There was this one day. We had a break between takes. We were both sitting on some crates, eating sandwiches. She was talking about her dog, and for some reason I couldn't stop watching her hands, the way she moved them when she spoke. I had this feeling right there that I was in trouble, that I'd crossed from admiration into something more personal. He laughed lightly, but there was sadness in it, and I kept it all to myself, every second of it. I became really good at pretending it was just a friendly thing. Vanessa nodded, eyes a little glassy. It's such a relatable kind of heartbreak. Loving someone quietly. Keanu looked at her. Yeah. And in our world, where everything gets broadcast and blown up, there's something strangely sacred about the feelings we never speak aloud. They stay untouched, almost more real because no one got to ruin them. Vanessa leaned back, letting that truth settle. But if you never told her, how do you know it wasn't mutual? Keanu's eyes flickered, and then he said it softly. Because I wasn't the only one. The room froze. Vanessa blinked, processing. What do you mean? Keanu looked at her meaningfully. I mean, she told someone. Not me, but someone. Vanessa swallowed hard, because she knew exactly what he was talking about. She remembered that off-camera moment years ago, backstage at an award show. Sandra, sipping wine, relaxed, a little nostalgic, had said it casually, like a confession that would go nowhere. I had the biggest crush on Keanu during Speed, but I never said anything. Didn't want to ruin the friendship. It came back to her in full force now. The casual tone, the way Sandra had brushed it off. But it hadn't been nothing. Vanessa looked at Keanu. She said it. Once. To me, off camera, years ago. I didn't think she meant it like that. Keanu smiled. But there was emotion in it. I think she did. She just didn't want to break what we had, and neither did I, so we danced around it. For years. Silence again. He leaned back in the chair, letting the weight of the years settle across his shoulders. I kept it to myself, he said quietly, but I wasn't the only one. As the audience holds its breath, Keanu leans back slightly, the weight of the past in his eyes. I kept it to myself, he says quietly, but I wasn't the only one. And with that, Vanessa freezes, because she knows exactly what he's about to say, and it's something Sandra herself once revealed. Off camera. The studio felt colder now, though the lights hadn't changed. The tension in the room wasn't dramatic, just real. It was the kind of silence that follows a truth people didn't expect to hear, but somehow always suspected. Vanessa took a slow breath. Her mind replayed Sandra's old confession, now no longer an offhand comment, but a missing piece of a much larger puzzle. She looked at Keanu, who was sitting quietly, eyes down, hands resting on his knees. She said gently, "Do you remember where you were when you heard she might have felt the same?" Keanu nodded slowly. It was years later. Someone mentioned it in passing. I think it was an interviewer or maybe a producer. They said something like, "You know, Sandra once said she had a crush on you during Speed." And I laughed. I thought it was a joke, but it stayed with me. Vanessa leaned forward, the curiosity in her voice now wrapped in emotion. "Did you ever go back and watch the interview?" He gave a soft chuckle. "Yeah, eventually I did." And there she was, Sandra, in some press junket, sipping coffee, being her usual candid self. And she just said it, just dropped it like it didn't mean anything. Vanessa tilted her head. But it did. Keanu looked at her. His expression said everything. I watched her say those words. "I had a little crush on Keanu during Speed." And I thought, what the hell were we doing? The audience laughed quietly. It wasn't humor. It was shared frustration. The ache of what could have been. Keanu sat back, looking at the ceiling briefly before continuing. I started thinking about all the moments we could have said something. There were so many wrap parties, dinners, phone calls that lasted longer than they needed to. And yet, we both stayed silent. He paused. I think we were afraid of ruining something we already cherished. That connection we had, it wasn't flirtation. It was deeper than that. And maybe we thought saying it out loud would have shattered it. Vanessa nodded. But it's hard, isn't it, living with the what-ifs? Keanu smiled with a kind of peace in his eyes, but it was layered with something heavier, regret maybe, or just understanding. It is. But I've learned something with time. The what-ifs only hurt when you believe the story's over. And maybe it never really ends. Maybe some feelings just shift. He folded his arms, lost in thought. There was this one premiere, he said. We hadn't seen each other in years. We hugged, talked for a few minutes, and it felt exactly the same. No awkwardness, just that same rhythm we always had. And as she walked away, I remember thinking, this will always feel like home, even if I never live here. The audience was still. Even Vanessa was quiet for a moment. I think people want those two characters you played in Speed to end up together in real life, she said softly. Keanu smiled. They weren't characters. Not really. I mean, yeah, we were acting. But that version of us, Jack and Annie, it wasn't fiction, it was just us without the fear. A long beat passed. Vanessa flipped one more cue card, but didn't read from it. She asked instead, do you think you missed your chance? Keanu looked down, then back up slowly. Yes. And no. That answer hung in the air. Some chances are meant to be missed, so they can stay perfect. He ran a hand through his hair. But I won't lie, there were nights I'd think about her and wonder, what if we had said something? What if we'd been a little braver? Vanessa's voice was almost a whisper. What do you think would have happened? Keanu didn't smile this time. I think everything would have changed. For better or worse, I don't know. But it would have changed. And maybe we weren't ready for that. Maybe the timing was never right. Vanessa tilted her head. Do you believe in timing? He nodded. Absolutely. It's everything, and it can be cruel. Because sometimes the right people meet at the wrong time. The room was silent again. Keanu's voice softened even more. But I don't regret what we didn't say. I think we protected something rare. And just because it didn't turn into love doesn't mean it wasn't love. Keanu presses his lips together and chuckles softly. Timing is a funny thing, he says. But before Vanessa can change the subject, Keanu lifts his eyes and adds, because what happened next changed everything we thought we knew about each other. Vanessa didn't speak right away. Something in Keanu's last words had landed deep, not just for her, but for everyone in the room. Even the cameraman looked like they had forgotten they were working. Keanu adjusted his posture, leaning forward. Slightly, his voice was quieter now, more reflective than confessional. Years passed, he began. We both lived our lives. Projects, travels, relationships. We'd run into each other here and there. Always that same ease between us. But we never talked about it. About that thing we almost were, Vanessa nodded slowly. Not even once? Keanu shook his head. Not until much later. I think we were both carrying the same silence out of respect for each other, for the moment we'd shared, and maybe because we didn't want to face the possibility that we'd missed something important. He paused, then looked her in the eyes. But we did talk about it eventually. The audience leaned in without realizing it. It was years later, Keanu said, after a charity event in LA. We ended up having a drink together afterward, just the two of us. It wasn't planned, and maybe that's why it worked." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "What did you say?" He smiled gently. "I told her the truth, that I had feelings for her during Speed, that I always wondered if she ever felt the same." Vanessa blinked. "And?" Keanu's eyes warmed. She laughed. That same laugh I remembered, and she said, "Keanu, you know I did." A ripple of emotion passed through the crowd. "She told me," Keanu continued, "that she'd felt it too, but she'd buried it the same way I had, because we were both trying to be good people, good professionals, good friends. We didn't want to break something we valued." He leaned back, breathing in deeply, and then we just smiled, like two people realizing they'd both been reading the same book in silence for 20 years. Vanessa smiled with emotion in her eyes. Did it hurt to know that the feeling had been mutual, but nothing ever came of it? Keanu didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said eventually. "And no." He paused. "I think we both felt a mix of warmth and ache, but mostly peace. Because by that point, we weren't two kids on a movie set anymore. We were different people. We'd lived, lost, grown." Vanessa nodded, visibly moved. "So, what happened after that conversation?" Keanu looked down for a moment, then up again. "We hugged. We thanked each other for being honest, and we said we were exactly what we needed back then, even if it wasn't meant to last." His voice was low but sure. "It's a rare thing," he continued, "to look someone in the eye and say, 'I loved you' in silence, and I'm okay that it stayed that way. It takes a kind of maturity that only time can give you." Vanessa was quiet. The audience was too. The stillness wasn't heavy. It was full of reverence. "I think people always assume a story has to end in a relationship to be meaningful," Keanu said. "But sometimes the point of a connection isn't to be together. Sometimes it's just to remind you what it feels like to feel." Vanessa whispered, "That's beautiful." Keanu smiled. "I think there's a strange kind of happiness in knowing we were both brave enough to feel it, even if we weren't brave enough to speak it back then. We found closure, not because it ended, but because we saw it for what it truly was." Vanessa leaned in again. "And what was it?" He didn't hesitate. "A kind of love, quiet, respectful, real, and it stayed with both of us." The camera slowly zoomed in as Keanu's eyes lifted, filled with memory but not sadness. "We both found happiness in other places," Keanu said, nodding gently. "But something she said in that conversation stayed with me for years." Vanessa leaned forward, compelled. "And what was that?" Keanu looked straight into the lens, as if speaking to someone far away, or maybe just within. She said, "Maybe we were meant to meet for something else entirely." "We both found happiness in other places," Keanu says, nodding gently. "But something she said in that conversation stayed with me for years." Vanessa leans in. "And what was that?" Keanu looks right at the camera. "She said, maybe we were meant to meet for something else entirely." Keanu's eyes were fixed on the camera, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Years away, somewhere quiet and warm, where memory wasn't a wound, but a whisper. Vanessa's voice broke the silence softly. She said, "Maybe we were meant to meet for something else entirely." What do you think she meant by that? Keanu let the question settle before answering. "I've thought about that moment more times than I can count," he said. "Back then I wasn't sure, but now I think she meant we weren't sent to each other for romance. We were sent for something deeper, quieter, like presence. Vanessa looked intrigued. Presence? He nodded. She showed up in my life at a time when I was floating, just beginning to get used to fame, just starting to understand what I would have to give up to keep going in this world. And there she was, so normal, so grounded, so light. A flicker of warmth passed across his face. There was this lightness about her, and not the fake kind. She didn't force joy. She was joy, but not naive, you know. She had depth, pain, curiosity. She could laugh and cry in the same breath. She reminded me of something I didn't realize I was forgetting. Vanessa leaned forward, sensing where this was headed. What was that? Keanu looked down, then back up with quiet intensity, that it was still safe to smile. The audience was still, no movement, just breathing. He continued, after some of the losses I'd experienced, I started building walls, slowly, quietly. I didn't even notice it, but I was growing harder, less open. People don't always see it because I smile, I work, I show up. But inside, I was starting to shut down. He paused. And then I met her. And she was like this little earthquake. Just enough to shake the dust off. Vanessa smiled, visibly touched. Do you believe that was fate? Keanu tilted his head, thoughtfully. I think it was something bigger than fate. Fate is directional. This felt more like grace. Like the universe gently placing someone in your path, not to change your direction, but to help you remember why you were walking it. He breathed in slowly, choosing his next words with care. Sometimes the gift isn't the relationship. Sometimes the gift is the reminder that you're still capable of connection, that your heart still works, that you still have softness inside. Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper now. Did she know she had that effect on you? Keanu smiled, looking off into a memory. I think she did. Maybe not fully, but she felt it. She always had this way of seeing people, not the version the world sees, the version they're trying to hide. He took a beat. After the death of Jennifer and Ava, everything went dark, not just around me, but inside me. There were days I didn't speak to anyone, days I didn't want to move, and I remember thinking, I don't know if I'll ever be okay again. Vanessa's face softened, and then Keanu's voice lowered, and then I thought of her laugh, her eyes, her ridiculous impressions, and something in me stirred. Not because I wanted her to fix me, but because she reminded me of a version of myself that had once been okay. He paused again, the weight of the past visible in his silence. She became this spiritual reference point, a symbol, I guess, not of love lost, but of light that never left. Vanessa blinked away a tear, barely holding it back. Sometimes people are gifts, Keanu said, not because they stay, but because they show up exactly when your soul needs a witness. There was something reverent about his voice now. The audience wasn't just listening, they were absorbing. I never saw her as just a missed chance, he continued. That would be too small, too selfish. She was a gift, and you don't mourn a gift. You carry it, you protect it. Vanessa swallowed hard. Do you think she knew you saw her that way? I hope so, he said quietly. I think I told her in all the ways that didn't need words. The kind of thank you that lives in the way you show up, the way you stay soft, even when life tries to harden you. Vanessa was quiet for a moment, then asked the question the room was already thinking. Would things... Keanu had just dropped something weighty. Vanessa didn't interrupt. She didn't speak. She knew enough by now to let silence do its job. He leaned back slightly in the chair, eyes distant, voice low. I remember the day clearly, he said. We had just wrapped a scene. It was a simple driving shot, nothing emotional. But for some reason I was shaking. My hands wouldn't stop. He swallowed hard. A call had come through earlier that morning. My sister had passed it along, quietly trying not to worry me. Jennifer, my partner at the time, had gone to the hospital, complications with the pregnancy. The studio was frozen. Keanu's voice cracked slightly. I flew out as soon as I wrapped the scene. And 2 days later, Ava was gone, stillborn. Gasps didn't echo, they were internal, held in throats, in hearts. Keanu looked down. 3 weeks later, Jennifer died in a car accident. Vanessa's hand covered her mouth. I was in pieces, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to make it public. I didn't want pity, or headlines, or any of it. I wanted to disappear. He paused, and I nearly did. The weight in the room wasn't heavy. It was sacred. I stopped returning calls. I didn't leave the house for days at a time. I was still under contract for a film, but I couldn't focus. I would stand on set, surrounded by lights, people, cameras, and feel absolutely nothing. Vanessa whispered, and Sandra. Keanu nodded. She didn't know the details, but she felt something. She sent me a letter, a handwritten letter. I still have it. It just said, "Don't let the silence steal your softness. The world still needs your kindness." He paused, breath shaky. It was the first time I cried in weeks. Vanessa looked like she wanted to speak, but couldn't, so she didn't. Keanu leaned forward again. There's a prayer I said once, late one night. I wasn't someone who prayed back then, not formally, but I said it out, loud, into the dark. I said, God, if there's anything left in me worth saving, send me a sign. He looked directly at Vanessa now, and the next day she walked in. The audience was still. She was doing a table read for a different movie, on the lot. Next door, we bumped into each other by accident. She gave me a hug that lasted a little too long. And then she said, "Hey, I missed you." He closed his eyes briefly, remembering. In that moment, I didn't feel fixed. I didn't feel healed. But I didn't feel alone. Vanessa's eyes were wet now, her voice trembling. "Do you think she was the sign?" Keanu nodded, his voice steady again. "I do, not sent to stay, not sent to rescue me, but sent to remind me that something soft still existed in the world, that God hadn't abandoned me entirely." He looked out at the audience. People think divine intervention is this big, dramatic lightning bolt, but sometimes it's just someone smiling at you when you forgot how to smile back. Sometimes it's a person who shows up without needing to know your pain, but somehow touches it anyway. He took a deep breath. I never told her what she did for me. Not fully. I didn't have to. That's the beautiful thing about grace. It doesn't ask for recognition. It just arrives, quietly, and saves what's left. The entire studio felt changed, not just the audience, everyone. Sound crew, lighting techs. Even the camera operator wiped away a tear between takes. Keanu leaned back once more, his hands folded in his lap. "I'm not a religious man in the traditional sense," he said, "but I believe in timing. I believe in the sacred. I believe God sends us people when we forget we're still human." He looked up directly into the lens. She walked in, not to stay, but to help me see what I was missing. Keanu's voice softens. I once asked God, if there's something left in me worth saving, send me a sign. He turns to Vanessa, and then she walked in. The studio goes still. Not to stay, he says, but to help me see what I was missing. There was a calm in the studio now, a kind of peace that doesn't come from answers, but from finally asking the right questions. Keanu sat with his hands folded, looking not at Vanessa, but somewhere deeper, somewhere inward. People think love is always about staying, he said softly, but sometimes love is just about showing up at the right moment, without asking for anything. Vanessa nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, and Sandra showed up. He smiled gently. She did, without needing to stay, without trying to fix me. She just reminded me who I was before the loss, before the silence. He took a long breath. I've come to believe that people are sent to us as mirrors. Sometimes all we need is someone to reflect a part of us we forgot existed. Vanessa blinked away a tear. Do you think that kind of connection ever truly ends? Keanu shook his head. No, because the message stays, even after the moment passes, even if the person walks away. What they awaken in you, that doesn't go away. He paused. I still think about her, not with longing, not with regret, just with gratitude. She was never mine, but she was a gift. Vanessa swallowed hard. And what do you hope people will take from this, from your story? Keanu looked up directly into the camera. That some stories don't end in romance, but they still begin in purpose. That just because something doesn't become everything doesn't mean it wasn't something holy, something true. The audience was silent, not from discomfort, but reverence. Keanu leaned back, eyes soft. We wait for the perfect love, the big ending, the forever. But sometimes the most powerful love is the one that passes through your life gently and leaves you better than it found you. Vanessa wiped a tear, whispering, "That's beautiful." Keanu simply nodded, his voice almost a breath. Some people